little one. Join us!
The silence of the deep mountains is not a void, but a heavy, expectant presence that weighs upon the soul of any traveler who dares to wander off the beaten path. In the high peaks of the Key Peninsula, where the mist clings to the ancient cedars like a shroud, a sound occasionally shatters the stillness, a rhythmic, percussive thud that feels less like a footfall and more like the pulse of the mountain itself. This is the herald of the Hitotsudatara, a creature of singular form and terrifying mystery that has haunted the collective psyche of Japan for centuries. It is described as a monstrous entity possessing only a single massive eye and one powerful leg, a design that seems to defy the laws of biological symmetry. Yet, when one stands in the freezing shadows of the forest, the logic of the natural world feels thin and fragile, and the possibility of such a misshapen horror becomes a suffocating reality. The locals say that to catch a glimpse of this being is to invite a life of unremitting misfortune, or perhaps to trigger an ancient curse that leads one to eventually cease all vital functions, in a state of inexplicable despair. But what if this creature is not a mere phantom born of cold and isolation? What if its form is a distorted mirror, reflecting a hidden, agonizing chapter of human history that the modern world has conveniently chosen to forget? Tonight, we shall venture into the heart of this darkness, peeling back the layers of myth to uncover a truth stained with soot, iron, and the tears of those who lived on the margins of civilization. If you have ever felt a prickle of unease while walking alone in the woods, or heard a metallic clink, where no metal should be, listen closely, for the history of the Hitotsudatara is closer to our own reality than we might care to admit. The existence of the Hitotsudatara is rooted deeply in the Hatanaki mountain range and the rugged slopes of Mount Obako, a region where the border between Wakayama and Nara prefectures blurs into a labyrinth of jagged cliffs and impenetrable ravines. The air here is thin, often carrying the scent of damp earth and rotting pine, a sensory environment that heightens the instinctual fear of the unknown. The physical appearance of this entity is as striking as it is grotesque. Witnesses throughout history have described a towering silhouette, with one enormous eye that glows with an unnatural internal fire, scanning the darkness with a predatory intensity. Below a torso of twisted muscle, there is but a single thick leg that allows the creature to traverse the vertical terrain, with an agility that mocks human movement. When winter blankets these peaks in white, the creature leaves behind tracks that defy conventional tracking. Deep singular depressions in the snow that look as though a massive wooden pestle has been driven into the earth by a giant. The psychological impact of discovering these tracks is profound. The realization that something massive is hopping through the frozen wasteland, closing the distance with every heavy impact, can drive a person to the brink of madness. This is not a creature that wanders aimlessly. It follows a schedule dictated by ancient ironclad laws of the spirit world. The most terrifying aspect of this legend is the timing of its manifestation, specifically on the 20th day of December. In the local dialect of the Hatanaki region, this day is whispered of as Hate no Hatsuka, a term that carries an omen of finality and dread. On this day, the mountains are considered closed to all human activity, and to violate this taboo is to invite a direct confrontation with the supernatural. The atmosphere in the villages surrounding the mountains on this day is one of suffocating tension. Families huddle indoors, bolting their doors and avoiding even the smallest glance toward the darkened peaks. It is believed that anyone foolish enough to tread the mountain paths on the 20th will be hunted by the Hitotsudatara, resulting in a permanent cessation of their life or a psychological trauma, so severe they never truly return from the heights. This rigid periodicity suggests that the creature is not merely a wild beast, but a guardian of a specific temporal boundary, a remnant of a time when the cycles of nature and the activities of man were governed by a much harsher set of spiritual negotiations. To truly understand the essence of this being, one must analyze the word that forms the core of its name, tatara. This term is inextricably linked to the ancient Japanese art of iron. Smelting, a process known as tatara-buki. In the eras before modern industrialization, the production of iron was a feat of Herculean labor and spiritual devotion. To create the high-quality steel required for swords and tools, iron, sand, and charcoal were fed into a massive clay furnace, which had to be kept at a searing, consistent temperature for several days and nights. The primary mechanism for providing the necessary oxygen was the foot-operated bellows, or tenbin budo. These bellows required a team of laborers to step on them rhythmically and continuously, using the weight of their bodies to pump air into the heart of the furnace. This was a grueling, soul-crushing task that pushed the human frame far beyond its natural limits. The physical environment of the forge was a hellscape of radiant heat, choking soot and the deafening roar of the flames, creating a microcosm of suffering that would eventually manifest in the very bodies of the workers. The toll of this labor was not merely temporary exhaustion. It was a permanent, visible deconstruction of the human form. By spending decades pushing down on the heavy bellows with one dominant leg, the muscles of the laborers' bodies became catastrophically imbalanced. One leg would grow abnormally thick and powerful, while the other would atrophy or become crippled by the sheer repetitive strain on the joints. Furthermore, the task of monitoring the molten iron required the smiths to stare directly into the blinding white light of the furnace to judge its temperature and purity by the color of the flames. Without any form of ocular protection, this constant exposure to intense infrared radiation and glare led to the rapid development of cataracts or severe retinal damage, often resulting in total blindness in one or both eyes. When we synthesize these physical realities, a chilling image emerges. A man with one functional, overdeveloped leg and one functional eye, his skin blackened by carbon and his lungs scarred by heat. The Hitotsudatara, therefore, is not a mere figment of the imagination, but a haunting archetypal representation of the occupational hazards and the physical sacrifices made by the anonymous craftsmen who built the foundation of Japanese civilization. The legends of the Hitotsudatara extend far beyond the mere physical degeneration of the human body. In ancient times, iron was more than just a resource. It was a source of immense political and military power, a gift from the earth that required secret knowledge to unlock. The groups of people who possessed the skills to smelt iron often lived in secluded communities deep within the mountains, far removed from the agrarian societies of the valleys. These smithing clans were shrouded in mystery, maintaining their own internal laws, rituals, and languages to prevent their technological secrets from leaking to rival factions. To the sedentary farmers of the lowlands, these mountain dwellers were an alien presence, men who worked with fire and stone, who possessed strange, distorted bodies, and who appeared and disappeared like ghosts in the mist. The intense secrecy of these ironworking groups, combined with their frightening physical appearance, created a fertile ground for the birth of a monster. The villagers did not see a crippled laborer. They saw a demon of the forge, a mountain god's servant, whose very presence signaled a disruption of the natural order. In the Yoshino region of Nara Prefecture, this intersection of the divine and the monstrous is even more explicit. Here, the Hitotsudatara is sometimes worshipped as a mountain deity, rather than being shunned as a demon. In the fluid landscape of Japanese folklore, the line between a god and a monster is often determined by the attitude of the observer and the quality of the interaction. When the people treat the mountain with respect and provide the necessary offerings, the entity acts as a protector of the iron veins and the forest. However, when the sanctity of the peaks is violated, such as by entering the forest on a forbidden day, the deity's benevolence curdles into a violent wrath, and the god takes on the form of the one-eyed, one-legged stalker. This duality reflects a deep-seated behavioral economics of the soul, the belief that the gifts of the mountain come at a price, and that price is often the physical and mental well-being of those who seek its treasures. The Hitotsudatara serves as a personification of this transactional fear, a reminder that the extraction of wealth from the earth always leaves a scar, both on the landscape and on the humans who do the work. If we dig even deeper into the bedrock of Japanese mythology, we find the divine ancestor of this mountain specter, the god Amenome Ikanokami. This deity, whose name literally translates to the one-eyed god of the heavens, is the patron of blacksmiths and metalworkers. While he does not feature prominently in the central narratives of the Kojiki or the Nihon Shoki, his presence is felt in the margins of ancient genealogies and local shrine traditions. He represents the primordial power of the forge, the divine spark that turns raw ore into a sharp blade. However, as the centuries passed and new religious systems like Buddhism and centralized Shinto took hold, the older, more specialized deities of the peripheral clans began to lose their status. They were relegated to the shadows, their shrines falling into ruin and their names forgotten by the ruling elite. It is a common phenomenon in folklore for a fallen god to transform into a yokai, a monster. One could argue that the Hitotsudatara is the tragic, lingering shadow of Amename Ikano Kami, a once glorious deity of industry who has been reduced to a limping horror, wandering the mountains in a state of eternal resentment for a world that no longer remembers his name. The sound of iron being struck that accompanies his appearance is the ghostly echo of his former divinity, a rhythmic reminder of the power he once held over the fate of nations. To bring this into a more visceral focus, let us consider a specific account passed down through generations of mountain hunters. Imagine a man, driven by desperation or perhaps an arrogant disregard for tradition, who decides to track a wounded deer into the heart of the Hatanaki Range on the 20th of December. The sky is the color of a bruised plum, and the wind carries a biting chill that seems to pierce through bone. As he descends into a deep valley, the silence is suddenly punctured by a sound that chills his blood, a rhythmic thudding that vibrates through the very soles of his boots. He turns to see a trail of deep circular pits in the snow, each one large enough to swallow a man's head. There is no trail of a second foot, only a single, relentless line of impacts. Panicked, he climbs an ancient, gnarled pine tree and watches from the branches. Out of the swirling snow emerges a figure that defies all reason. It is a mass of shadow and muscle, standing nearly 8 feet tall, with a single, unblinking eye that reflects the pale light of the moon like a polished mirror. The creature pauses, tilts its head, and then emits a sound that is not a scream, but a sharp, resonant clang like a hammer striking an anvil in an empty cathedral. The hunter survives, but he returns to his village a hollow shell of his former self, his hair turned white and his voice lost forever. This story highlights the psychological weight of the encounter, the way the creature's presence shatters the victim's understanding of reality, leaving them in a state of permanent spiritual dislocation. In the mountains of Wakayama, particularly near Mount Obako, there is a variation of the legend that describes the Hitotsudatara, sliding over the tops of bamboo leaves with the speed of a falling star. This detail adds a layer of supernatural grace to an otherwise clunky, hopping monster. From a sociological perspective, this might be a distorted memory of the incredible mountain climbing skills possessed by the itinerant smiths and miners. These men, who spent their entire lives navigating the treacherous slopes to find ore and timber, developed a familiarity with the terrain that would seem magical to a sedentary farmer. Their ability to move quickly through dense underbrush and over slippery slopes was translated into the mythic capability of the yokai. There is also a more grounded biological theory that attempts to explain the phenomenon as a misidentification of the now extinct Japanese wolf. When a wolf travels through deep snow, it often places its hind paw in the exact impression left by its front paw. To conserve energy, a behavior known as direct registering. To an untrained eye peering through a blizzard, these overlapping tracks can look like the prints of a single-legged creature. However, the wolf theory fails to account for the metallic sounds or the singular eye. It suggests that while nature provides the canvas, it is the human history of labor and religion that provides the paint for the portrait of the Hitotsudatara. The very name, Hitotsudatara, carries an air of profound melancholy when whispered in the cold mountain air. The word Datara was once used as a title of respect for the master smiths, the men who understood the language of fire and stone. They were the alchemists of their age, transforming the earth's raw materials into the tools of survival. Yet their reward was a life of isolation and a body broken by the very technology they mastered. They loved the mountains, for the mountains provided the ore and the charcoal that fueled their passion. But they were also the mountains' prisoners. The footprints left in the snow by the Hitotsudatara are the only remaining testament to their existence. A spectral signature of a class of people who were essential to society but were never truly a part of it. As we surround ourselves with the sleek, mass-produced metal products of the modern age, we have lost our connection to the source of these materials. The Hitotsudatara serves as a grim reminder of the human cost of progress, a ghost that emerges from the fog to remind us that every advancement is built upon a foundation of sacrifice. This folklore plays an essential role in the spiritual ecology of Japan. It acts as a mechanism for maintaining a balance between human ambition and natural limits. By designating a specific day as forbidden, the legend of the Hitotsudatara enforced a period of rest for both the workers and the environment. It prevented the over-extraction of resources and gave the mountain a chance to breathe without the constant pressure of human presence. In our modern, high-speed society, where the expectation of 247 productivity has become a global norm, the wisdom of the Forbidden Day feels more relevant than ever. The yokai is a manifestation of the collective subconscious urging us to stop, to respect the boundaries of the sacred, and to acknowledge that there are forces in this world that do not answer to human will. The Hitotsudatara is the guardian of the pause, the enforcer of the boundary between the world of the living and the world of the ancient silent earth. As we conclude our investigation into the shadow of the one-legged smith, let us reflect on the true nature of this being. Is it merely a monster of the imagination, designed to scare children and keep hunters out of the cold? Or is it a living monument to the thousands of men who lost their sight and their mobility in the service of the forge? Perhaps it is both a cultural ghost that carries the weight of a forgotten industry and the resentment of a displaced god. The answer remains hidden in the shifting mists of the Hatanaki Range, audible only to those who possess the courage to listen to the sounds of the mountain night. But one thing is certain: as long as we continue to ignore the lessons of history and the sanctity of the natural world, the Hitotsudatara will continue to hop through the darkness, its single eye watching for the next person who dares to cross the line. Tonight, if you hear a heavy thud against the side of your house or the faint, distant ring of a hammer against steel, do not go to the window. Do not seek to satisfy your curiosity. Instead, turn off the lights, sit in the silence, and offer a moment of respect to the broken men and the forgotten gods, who still walk the high ridges, waiting for the world to remember them. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the dark heart of Japanese folklore. The story of the Hitotsudatara is a reminder that our past is never truly gone. It simply changes its shape and waits in the shadows. If you found this exploration into the hidden history of the mountains intriguing, I invite you to share your own thoughts and experiences. Have you ever encountered a taboo or a local legend that defies explanation? Do you have stories of the mountains that have been passed down in your family? Please share them in the comments, as these stories are the threads that keep our history alive. We will continue to peel back the veil of the unknown in our future investigations, seeking the truth behind the monsters that haunt our dreams. Until then, stay safe and remember to listen to the warnings of the wind. We shall meet again in the next chapter of The Unseen World.